Oh, let me tell you something. Busting makes me feel good.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Blockbusting, the podcast where we love to hate the movies.
So bad.
This is a rough one. I'm your host, Jay Light. Joining me today, Kelsey Goldberg.
Yeah.
What up, Kels?
I'm having such a bad day because I rewatched this movie we're going to talk about.
This is how you started your day off. I'm so sorry.
It's so much worse than I remembered it.
When was this movie, by the way, before we get too deep in and just leave people guessing, is You've Got Mail.
Yeah.
A 1998 American romantic comedy film starring Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, directed by Nora Ephron. It tells the story of two people in an online romance who are unaware that they are also business rivals. It received mildly positive reviews from critics.
Yeah, but then it became this thing that if you were a girl in the 90s that had this by the time we were tweens and teenagers, it was the late 90s, early 2000s, and you were just supposed to love it.
Right.
And then I'm watching it as a little kid being like, this is awful. But then my friend's like, isn't it great? Isn't it so sweet? And I'm like, I want friends. Yeah, I love it too.
This movie starts off with cheating.
Yeah.
That's where the baseline of You've Got Mail is.
Yeah. Well, it's I could argue that the internet provided an interesting question of is emotional cheating?
Right. This is some who knows back in the day
right.
kind of
But
stuff.
the first major flaw is both of these characters, before you know that they're both despicable for other reasons, are too cowardly to let their current partners go free.
Right.
And it's well, now I don't want you to be happy in the end. I want you to be miserable and die alone because these poor people that you're with think everything's okay because you're telling them everything's okay.
Right.
When you clearly don't want to be with them. And then it's not till months and months and months later in the world of the movie that they finally break up with their other partners. And it's by the time you broke up with them, if at the start of the movie you had just done it, they would have already been healed and possibly onto their new and better relationship.
Imagine how many typewriters Greg Kinnear brought into Meg Ryan's apartment before she finally was like, you know what, this isn't working anymore.
Yeah. Yep. And it's also, that's the other thing is it does that classic 90s thing that's every successful couple needs someone who's kind of your personality trait opposite, which is fine. I like partners who have qualities that I don't, because then together we feel more unified against the world, I guess.
Right.
But they play such a gendered judgment. So Meg Ryan's character is beloved and celebrated for being sweet and not being able to say a mean word about anything, and for having kind of have this nostalgia for yesteryear and the time of small bookshops. And Greg Kinnear's character is an oaf because he has those same exact qualities. And then Tom Hanks is charming and seductive because he's this shrewd man of business, and it's not personal, it's business.
Right.
But his girlfriend,
shark.
but his girlfriend Parker Posey is this shrewish monster because she has the same qualities. And
right.
it's I think there's an interesting rom-com in two people who are in happy relationships and are just afraid to get out of them because there's nothing wrong, and they've learned that if you're happy that you're supposed to settle for that.
Right.
And then they meet someone who kind of excites them and has it extra little zhuzh, and it's how do you break up with someone when nothing's wrong? That's a real thing I've experienced in past relationships where I'm I'm just not in love with you anymore, but you're wonderful, you didn't do anything wrong, things are good, it's just it's ran its course. That's an interesting movie.
Right.
But the person is not flawed because he had these same, he's not less of a man because he had these characteristics I also have.
Right.
And I'm not an awful woman because I also had these more masculine characteristics he had. We just
right.
Not every relationship's meant to last forever, and that doesn't make the people bad.
Right. You know what? You raise a really good and interesting point, which is this movie kind of fails to capitalize on its premise in a way that would have made it a much more interesting and entertaining movie.
Yeah.
It could have been this really small, because there's so many parts when I was watching this when the dialogue or the sequencing that was going on, I was like, this rings true and is good, but it's just it's not quite there. It just feels it felt very middle of the road. It felt like it was a gigantic missed opportunity.
That's the thing too. So I started to get like a little bit of anxiety when I was like coming on, because I was like, oh man, like shitting on Nora Ephron is such a trite thing to do. It's also such a sexist thing to do, because it's like, oh, chick flick, blah, blah. And I'm like, I love Nora Ephron. I love When Harry Met Sally. I love Julie and Julia. Like, I think she gets a lot of crap that is unfair and just rooted in this idea that like movies made for male audiences are inherently better and movies made for female audiences are inherently like lesser.
Right.
And I think that's only true when the movies made for female audiences are written by men.
Yeah.
I think that's the only time I'm like, yeah, there's absolutely chick flicks that are just lowbrow and meant to be lowbrow, but women chose from what like, there's like that Noam Chomsky quote about like people only have the option to choose based on what's presented to them. So judging them for choosing shit when they're only presented shit is really unfair.
That's such a smart. That's, by the way, I think in almost 140 episodes, I think you're the first person to reference Noam Chomsky on this podcast.
Oh man, stepping up, other guests.
Such a good. I mean, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
The problem is not that the options are not there. It's just that this is what everybody's been fed for such a long time.
Yeah.
There are you have other choices that would fit better, but it's like, oh, we're getting this.
Yep.
We're getting You've Got Mail.
Yeah, this is the fucking lazy ass script the studio decided to greenlight.
Exactly.
But so that's the thing too, is like even by Nora Ephron standards, this is bad. I would argue this is one of her worst films because it lacks so much charm. There's 2 scenes in it which are great. And I was like, fuck you, this entire movie is supposed to be as witty and sharp as these 2 scenes. There's these like bright
and which
lights.
are those 2 scenes for you?
It's the one where Meg Ryan gets stood up and they're trying to figure out all of the reasons why. And it's that fast talking. Maybe he got trapped here. Maybe he got trapped here. And then Steve Zahn's like opens a newspaper and a guy got arrested for trying to kill someone on a roof.
The
2 blocks.
rooftop killer.
Yeah. And he's like, oh my God, he was the rooftop killer. And it's so funny. And it's so witty, and it's so like when friends do this really unhelpful thing to other friends when it's like, oh no, he didn't stand you up. Like he definitely, as if like asking her to cling on to this guy is like better advice. And they make all these excuses for like, no, he really is into you. And it's like, he's not into you. You are allowed to judge him for that. And you deserve to like, that's what they should be saying. So it's like, this is kind of, it just like, is both relatable because we've all had those conversations, but really highlights the absurdity of those conversations by elevating it to he couldn't be there because he was in jail for murder. But really, he really likes you. Like you are valued by this murderer. And then, what was the other one? I wrote it down. And then the other one was the go to the mattresses sequence where Tom Hanks is explaining to her the quote from the Godfather. And she's like, why does every man obsess with the Godfather? And then it's that kind of back and forth where he's like quoting all those Godfather quotes, and he's like, it's that montage,
and she calls the media, and then they start doing all the picketing.
Well, that's when it got bad.
Right.
Just the dialogue.
Just right before then?
Yeah, where he's like, well, the Godfather is like provides the wisdom for all life, and he's like, what day is it? Starts quoting. I'm like, that was very funny, but also, holy fuck, if you are a heterosexual woman, you will have to listen to all of your partners wax poetic about The Godfather. And it is, in fact, a great movie.
Right.
But, like, it's not the only great movie, man.
I mean, Godfather 2 is better than The Godfather.
Yeah. But that's also a conversation analysis I've had to listen to 100 times.
Of course it is. Because men have, we can only identify with men in suits.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I will say this. I think Nora Ephron, I have a lot of cultural blind spots.
Yeah.
And those are well documented. And Nora Ephron happens to be one of those blind spots.
Yeah.
I have not seen almost everything that she has made.
And you know what? I've also missed a lot. I was like looking it up because I was like, do I hate before? Like I was like, do I hate Nora Ephron because I hate this movie so much? Is this internalized misogyny? And then I was like, no, I like enough of her films that like my hatred for this movie is valid. It's bad.
But I haven't seen When Harry Met Sally.
You need to. It's good. I
haven't seen Sleepless in Seattle.
That one is problematic, but like no more so than any other 90s movie, and it's kind of fun. But it's also not great.
I haven't seen Julie and Julia.
So good, especially if you like anything to do with food. You smell the foods.
I love food.
Yeah.
I haven't seen, I guess she wrote and directed Bewitched. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
With Will Ferrell and Nicole Kidman?
Yep.
Right.
They filmed that by my childhood home.
what did you see that one?
No, because I really love the original television
You're like,
show.
I'm gonna pass.
Yeah.
But she's an Academy Award nominated screenwriter, and she's famous for doing these. Obviously, When Harry Met Sally is like in the rom-com all-time canon.
Yeah.
From what I can tell.
And it elevated rom-coms.
Right.
And it was honest and about like sex and relationships and how those are not always interchangeable. And it's a really interesting exploration of like platonic friendship between two heterosexual individuals, which was like really groundbreaking for the 90s. Like if you talk to your parents, they didn't like same-sex friends was not a thing that they grew up with. Whereas like I've had best friends that are guys my entire life. And I get really weirded out when I'm like, if I'm on a date with a guy and he's like, oh yeah, I don't have many female friends. I'm like, bye.
Right. Now it's seen as a bad sign.
Yeah. Well, I'm like, that means you've got no one else to talk to about your feelings. Mm-hmm. And one person that's too much emotional labor for one person. I've got 25 people I talk to about my feelings.
Right.
You need I want to be the most important of the 25, but I don't want to be the only one.
Of course not. That's too much. It's just too much to ask.
Yeah, it is.
So this whole section, also, I didn't realize that Nora Ephron was, I just randomly scrolled to this page, is that she knew the identity of Deep Throat from Watergate.
She did?
Yeah. This is on her page. For many years, Ephron's one of the people who knew the identity of Deep Throat, the anonymous informer for articles written by her ex-husband, Carl Bernstein. Oh, it's because she was married to Carl Bernstein. Ephron read Bernstein's notes, which referred to Deep Throat as MF. Bernstein claimed it stood for my friend, but Ephron correctly guessed it stood for Mark Felt, the former associate director of the FBI. And she, after Ephron's marriage to Bernstein ended, Ephron revealed Deep Throat's identity to her son Jacob and also to anyone else who asked. She was just dropping that it was Mark Felt for years.
I mean, that's kind of funny, but also what an asshole thing to do to your ex.
Man.
Like, I'm just gonna wreck your entire journalistic integrity and put a witness at risk.
Right. I'm
gonna put a whistleblower at risk for the U.S. government because I'm pissed at you, ex-husband.
Wow, Nora Ephron. Where's the screenplay about that?
Yeah.
Where's that movie?
That would be such a flaw. But if it was a Nora Ephron movie, she'd have to end up with Mark at the end.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's still a chance. Nora Ephron's got daughters.
Dead. Oh,
but
she's dead.
Well, I know she's dead, but she also, I mean, she co-wrote it. She co-wrote You've Got Mail with her sister, Delia. Delia, excuse me. And her sister's still alive, so she could write it.
Yeah.
Delia, let's get in there.
I don't know if I trust the people behind You've Got Mail.
I mean, Delia wrote The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants.
Oh, I love the books or the movie?
The screenplay, the movie.
I mean, that's a great movie, but the books are mwah.
I hope that maybe that's a story that gets told one day. Anyway, so besides the point, though, that would be a great wacky womp. Oh boy!
Instead of being like "fuck you, I'm taking the dog," she was like "fuck you, I'm putting that whistleblower's life at risk."
Look, I'm telling everybody what happened. Yeah. Everybody's gonna go down.
It's actually funny though because there was a weird. So rewatching it, I hated it a lot more than I remembered hating it.
So yeah, what did you hate about it this time?
Its politics are inherently bad and petite bourgeois. Both characters have like an active disdain for the working class. Mm-hmm. Meg Ryan, when she's talking about what's wrong with the big chain store, it's not that it's putting like mass amounts of small time shops like hers. In fact, she doesn't even hate it for any other reason than it's her individual shop that is going out, which is why she's able to forgive him at the end. She doesn't seem to have an issue with like the massive chain putting small business owners out of business. And when she complains about it, it's that the employees probably don't even read.
Right.
Because God forbid a working class person who has to take a minimum wage job at a mega store. No, they're not curious. They don't have a life they need to escape.
Right.
Or any kind of intellectual curiosity. They don't read. And it's just so condescending. But such a 90s liberal attitude towards the working class and the poor. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if that's really the big issue, then you should be pushing for like built-in work training that gives these people a literary education so they can do their job to the fullest, but also be these like fulfilled humans. But no, it's just that like idiots get employed there.
The worst part of it too is that she gets proven right. Of course, it's written in that way. But she gets proven right by the coworker, by the worker, when she's just sitting there grieving inside of the bookstore.
Yeah.
Who doesn't know where the one children's book is. But also, it's not even his fault. Totally. It's the lady who's like, I don't know what this book is.
The
I don't
one
know.
about shoes. Like
There's so many. Cinderella? There are a lot of books about
Well, and
shoes.
also it's like,
lady, come on.
I think you would have a valid argument that with a bookstore that has that many titles, thousands upon thousands, that even the most educated person in the world is not going to be able to offer the same level of service as a small bookstore when employees can actually learn about and remember and know details and facts and possibly even have read all of the merchandise in the small store. Right? Like that is an advantage to small bookshops. The employees are more knowledgeable, not because they're inherently better or smarter than the people getting paid minimum wage, but because there's a smaller selection.
The other thing too is I've never been to a Barnes and Noble or something in that vein, or a Borders or whatever, and all of the employees there look like they read. Yeah. I've never been to a chain bookstore and been like, these people are fucking dum-dums.
No, I mean,
are illiterate.
When I was in Canada, I was trying to get a job at Indigo, which is their Barnes & Noble, and it was incredibly competitive, and your application had a lot of questions about books.
Yeah.
They wanted people who loved to read.
As they should.
Yeah. Yes. And then there's another line, too, when she's talking, I think at the cafe, where she's like, oh, you said your name was Joe, like you're a one-name person, like a Tiffany or a whatever.
Janice.
A Janice.
Which is also not
says,
like a stereotypical.
The girls these days, it's like
name.
the whole world is filled with cocktail waitresses. And it's like, what the fuck? Why is it a bad thing?
Right.
I like cocktails and I like when they're brought to me on a tray. They're like, what's wrong with being a cocktail waitress? Like, why is appearing like a cocktail waitress and a negative?
Yeah.
And also, cocktail waitresses tend to be incredibly cultured because they work at night. So what's free to do during the day? Museums.
Right.
And they tend to be around like people who do late night things, especially in New York. What is that? Theater and concerts and jazz and music. Like, I don't know a lot of ditzy, uncultured cocktail waitresses. I just know a lot of yet to be successful jazz singers or actresses or playwrights or like
who should all be cultured because they're trying to enter that industry. So they should have at least a basis of taste and artistic like knowledge that they can build their own
and
stuff
whether or
off
not
of.
they become successful, like they might spend their entire life as a cocktail waitress. That's not a judgment on their taste level.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just, there's like lines like that I'm like, that is absolutely the screenwriter's point of view coming through, and it's such a 90s liberal ideology. At the cover, I think it was like 1994 of the Democratic Party's magazine, they talked about how in order to win votes, they need to abandon the working class to get suburbanites, and they're like, and to get tech people. And they're like, for every tech person we get, like, and they call the people they leave behind peasants in the age of steam.
What?
Yes.
What?
Yep. And that was like Clinton, like it's also called like Clintonian democracy, but it was their take on what the Democratic Party needed to do to beat Reaganism, which is essentially, well, let's just have Reagan-like economics with a more liberal, like social worldview. And that is rampant through this film. Like even the idea, even the thing that you see all the time in like, I mean, it predates it. What is it? The Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford. The way we were.
The Way We Were. Yes.
Is like the Republican and the communist. Which, as a socialist and communist, I'm like, I would fuck never. And it's not because I don't think that people can like. It's because I don't think that love can overcome something like that, because I don't view politics as merely a thing that exists when you go to the voting booth. I think all politics at their core is a statement on whose suffering you think should continue and whose suffering you don't. And for me, a world full of love means the least amount of suffering. So someone who is trying to build a world with more suffering, like that is incompatible. And in this movie, they tell a story. There's like this quirky little lady who works at Meg Ryan's bookstore named Birdie, where she fell in love with Franco.
Yep.
And they tell it like, oh, it's so funny. Like the crazy things people do on vacation. I'm like, fucking a fascist is not okay.
Right.
And like if love can overcome fascism, like Marianne Williamson, you really fucking need to listen to this. If like individual micro interpersonal love can make you forgive a fascist, then maybe that's not the value we need to be upholding, is like this individualistic sense of forgiveness. business and more a commitment to a greater good. And in a movie that should be about like a good working class, I mean, also the apartment she lives in, no one who owns a small fucking bookshop could live on the Upper West Side in the 90s.
Unless she's extremely fucking bougie and has a lot more money than we are led to believe.
Yes.
Which could very well be true.
Could be true, but then like, I mean, even the fact that her bookshop closes and she's like not panicked about how she's going to pay rent is like a little, I was like,
man.
that's, and she's like, yeah, all my employees lived in rent control apartments. I was like, even in the 90s, that's kind of hard to believe. But like, it could have been about like, what would happen if you did fall in love with someone and then find out after you've, fell for that like unique way they smile and the way they laugh and that funny way they pick up on that like eye twitch you have that no one else has, all those those very personal individualistic things that like flush out how we love our person. What if you found out they worked for ICE? Right. I don't think if you can get over that, then you actually don't care that much about human rights.
Exactly.
Period. But that would be an interesting movie because I also don't think that's the kind of thing that you find out and then leave right away. I do think a person would have to wrestle with it, but any good person would ultimately be like, I can't get over the fact that you torture children when you're not with me. Like that's that should be a deal breaker.
Exactly, because politics at the end of the day, it colors your worldview. You can't escape that. Yeah. So that's the thing with it's like. And part of this I think comes down to, in this movie in particular, the fact that Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan essentially share the same worldview. Yes. It's just that only one of them is actually inconvenienced. Yep. That's the only reason why they get together at the very end. Right. Because
she's able to forgive it and she's able to thrive despite it. And her employees all seem to be able to afford Upper West Side apartments. So like they're fine too. And she doesn't care about like that's like there's supposed to be like a Barnes and Noble, so they didn't just put people out of business on the Upper West Side. Right. They also put people out of business in Brooklyn and all these other towns, and she doesn't care about that.
Oh man! Also, this you can really smell the '90s on this movie with the amount of disdain they had for Brooklyn.
Yeah, it's like man, if you kept that apartment, you'd be loaded now.
Oh man! So I got a question, and this I think is I'm really interested to hear what your take on this one is. So. For me, one of my biggest problems with the movie is that you're having, as is often in rom-coms, you're having a lot of really unlikable characters at the core of the movie. Yeah. And the sort of the trick that happens in rom-coms a lot, I found, is that the unlikable characters are played by likable people, and so they change over the course of the movie and become better people, but they also... you still like watching them because they're likable actors, charming people. Tom Hanks does a great job of being a bad person, but who's a charming character and somebody who I like watching sort of bumble around in like a Hugh Grant sort of way. Yes. So I did not feel the same way about Meg Ryan.
No. I think that's because she is written... I mean, I think Meg Ryan as an actress is very likable, but Tom Hanks gets very active scenes where he's like when he's like making faces as he's typing and you see him like arguing his case in the gym, and Meg Ryan just kind of sits and is pensive and waxes poetic. And I think it is an ideal of a woman and she played that woman brilliantly, that just doesn't resonate in the post-manic pixie dream girl world. Like any woman who is that still and she like only ever wears like beige in the whole movie. That was another thing. I was like, I love the 90s because that's when I was a kid, and when they like Tom Hanks brought kids in, I was like, ooh, fun, like something I can relate to. How I experienced the 90s, I was like, why are they all in khaki? Like New York sucks. I'm so glad I was raised in Southern California where everything was day glow.
Beige dress and beige cardigan.
Yeah, like everything in this whole movie is beige, and her entire character is beige, and she's utterly unoffensive. Right. And she's utterly, her worst quality is that she can't say mean things when she gets wronged. Right. And I just think that like we're at a point where we're like, any woman who is earnestly like that has been raised in an incredibly oppressive environment, is not self-actualized, to kind of steal a term from the same culture I'm making fun of. And I think that as a culture, and especially our generation, we see ourselves as flawed and like actively wrestling with that. And like, I think the one thing that is endearing with Tom Hanks's character is he is wrestling with the ways in which he's flawed. And of course he comes out on the, well, I'm successful so therefore I'm fine.
Yeah.
But his actual wrestling, like, how do you wrestle with ambition and the harm that can come from that? And like, I mean, I wrestle with those, and just in an industry where it's like, a lot of opportunities come from people who you know, and you have to ask, and what if I'm am I taking it from someone who deserves it more? But I also work really hard. Like, we wrestle with that. So it's like that.
And the fact of like, am I good enough to deserve this on my own? Otherwise, why would I be asking for it? And that whole kind of thing.
Yeah. And she's not wrestling with anything in herself.
Right.
She's just waiting for something to happen to her. And like the most endearing she is in the whole movie is when she finally does break up with Greg Kinnear. And his character, I would argue, is the only good one, but they write him like such a fucking oaf. And Greg Kinnear is such a fucking obnoxious asshole that like, I'm just like, how did you make the one guy who seems to be right, who has the correct concerns about like, hey, maybe we're entering a new industrial revolution. Like, the guy who is right is just shut up, buddy. Like, he has all my politics. And I'm like, Bill, you're annoying. Get off the screen.
I didn't even recognize that was Greg Kinnear because I've never seen him wear glasses in anything before.
Yeah.
That's how much of a sea change it was. When the credits rolled, I was like, that's Greg Kinnear?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't seem... I caught no wind of that ever.
Yeah, well, because he normally plays more likable, charming, whatever, and they had him play this like just such a arrogant oaf. But like, I mean, he put his career on the line for the woman he loved because it was a conflict of interest. And when he realized he wasn't in love with her, he just comes out and says it.
Immediately.
Oh, and that was the other thing too. It's like, no way his character is going to fall for the Republican.
Right.
Like the Republican TV reporter. Like, maybe as a fling, but he is so concerned with like the sense of what you buy means something, what you use means something, the parts of culture that you opt in mean something, that I'm like, that's the writer's worldview being like forced on characters, but it doesn't make sense for his character. And the bit about Meg Ryan that was the other thing. She admits that she forgot to vote in the last mayoral election because she was getting a manicure.
Right.
The whole her character,
12-hour manicure.
Yeah, 12-hour manicure. Be like, fuck you. What? Also, her character is supposed to be about trying to fight this like. It could arguably be about trying to like fight gentrification, and in New York coming in and wiping out an old New York, and Giuliani is the figurehead for all those changes.
Right.
So to make it an endearing quirk, we're supposed to forgive that she forgot to stop Giuliani is just like ludicrous. Like, I get mad that people voted for Garcetti because he's doing such a bad job, and I recognize that there was almost no narrative about him being bad put out there before he got reelected this most recent time. So people I'm like, yes, I did not know it was Ernest, and I'm still like, fuck you, look what you did with your vote.
It's hard for me to think about because I don't know if the answer is yes at all. But do you think there's anybody besides Meg Ryan who could have played this character and pulled off the movie and improved it, or is it just kind of fucked by the writing that nobody would have been able to do it?
Ironically, I think Parker Posey could have done it because I think she could have added a level of imperfection that would have humanized her the way Tom Hanks the way the writing of Tom Hanks' character where he wrestles with his personal flaws humanized him. Meg Ryan was just written perfect, and Meg Ryan is a practically perfect individual.
Right.
And she's the epitome of the 90s individual, which makes it utterly uninteresting and to like watch her or root for her. And Parker Posey is just a very quirky individual, and I think she could have.
It would have been some proto Manic Pixie Dream Girl stuff to have Parker Posey play that role.
Been. And like, even when she's like, I didn't vote, like your current material conditions, you're losing your job and your source of income because of trends that were amplified and accelerated based on policy passed by Giuliani. Mm-hmm. You should feel fucking guilty about it. It should be like Sarah Paulson in American Horror Story Cult, where she voted for Jill Stein and then Trump won, and she's like literally has a mental breakdown because of it and is like hallucinating clowns.
Is that what that whole show's about?
Yeah.
I remember them saying that it was. I've never watched. The only American Horror Story season I ever saw was Freak Show, but I remember them being when season was coming out. People were like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be about the election." So that's the whole premise of the show.
I mean, there might be more. I'm actually very phobic of clowns, so I've never seen Freak Show because I know there's a clown, and I watched. I think after the first episode, I was like, well, let me give it a week. If I can like sleep through the night, we could watch this. And I did not sleep through the night, so I've only seen the first episode. But that's like her character's thing is she's having these like panic attacks and hallucinations. And I think the story, like I think maybe the clown cult ends up being a real cult. So she's some of this is hallucinations and some of this is really happening. But she's the first person to notice it, and no one believes her. I'm assuming that's where the story is going, just because.
The girl,
that's how story
instead
works.
of the boy who cried wolf, it's the girl who cried Jill Stein.
Yes. Yeah. But like she's so crippled with guilt about voting for Jill Stein in a state that mattered.
Right.
She's from like Wisconsin or Michigan in the show. So like that is a state where that vote, if you live in California, you fucking write in your own dog. They always call the results of the election before they finish counting our ballots. Your vote for president has never mattered and it never will.
Right.
And it matters in the primary, though. So vote in the primary.
Primary is going to be an interesting time this year.
I'm going to cry, I assume.
If we have, I think Meg Ryan could use a little Marianne mindset back in the day.
Yeah.
She definitely could have used some reading.
It's funny, too, because after this, my boyfriend and I were like, oh, where did Meg Ryan go? And there's this whole article on how she like left the industry because she's like, it was too much pressure being America's sweeheart.
Yeah, I buy that. I was wondering where she was.
And also, the version of America's sweetheart you was this incredibly like non-realistic perfect person that like fuck do I not envy you for feeling the pressure to try to embody even an eighth of that in your everyday life, because it's so like even really like good people are too loud, or maybe they're too didactic, or maybe they're messy. Like we're all imperfect in some way.
Right.
Maybe we're klutzy, but we're not Zooey Deschanel, so it's not cute.
Right. Well, I mean, there's also a limit to which quirkiness and cuteness can play out theoretically in the life of, and I wouldn't say just an actor or an actress, I would say in like our collective psyche.
Yeah.
Where I think we have now reached the post-manic pixie dream girl era.
Oh, thank God.
Where we don't buy it as much on screen or off.
I'm just like really waiting for the like female trope that's like the overbearing, shrieky woman who yells at people, but it's cute and charming, because that's my fucking heyday. Like that's when I'm gonna come into
I mean,
my
that's
own.
that's my type of woman anyway. That's
Hell
the
yeah.
kind of woman I'm the most attracted to, is someone who's mean to me. So I am
didn't say mean,
all
I
about
just
that.
meant like right.
Either way, yell at me. Everything's gonna be A-okay in my book. We are gonna stay together.
Yeah. The movie did though, when they were like, "Oh yeah, it's so sweet." She like fell in love with Franco. I was like, "This movie is inherently fascist." And am I gonna go on a podcast and be like, "You've Got Mail is fascist"? Because everyone's gonna be like, "Jumped the shark," or "You're reading too much into it." But I was like, "No, but like it literally is."
Yeah.
It's like,
and they all laugh it off. They're like, it's whatever. And then Steve Zahn is the only one who's like very troubled by what happened.
yeah. As you fucking like, I'm just gonna say this now.
And Greg Kinnear too, I think.
Yeah, Greg Kinnear is like, that's not okay.
Right.
It's not like she like fell in love with like a communist revolutionary who maybe like had good values but did bad things. She fell in love with a fucking fascist dictator. So like if you're listening to this and you're like, Kelsey's wrong about everything, You Got Mail is cute, and you go to Brazil and you fuck Bolsonaro, I just want to say you're a monster. And like, I hope you're in the bunker with him when he gets his, because fascists always ultimately get theirs.
What we're saying is go throw a milkshake on Nora Ephron's grave. Because that's what she deserves for making this movie.
How do you title the episodes?
This just Kelsey Goldberg hates You Got Mail. But
Okay.
you bet this is going to be the preview clip.
Hell yeah.
This is great. This is great.
Just go throw a milkshake.
So, thank you for a very enlightened and surprisingly political discussion of You Got Mail.
If you ever want to talk to me, that part of my personality is inescapable.
I dig it. I thank you. This is a great episode. I had a lot of fun.
Of course, thank you for having me on to call You Got Mail fascist, because apparently it is.
So where can listeners be if they want to find you and argue with you or agree with you? What's the best channel they can do that in?
I'm on Instagram at 24kgold. I'm on Twitter at Kelsey F Gold, and I also have a podcast called Pasta Talkins about what is probably my most offensive and polarizing opinion, which is that pasta is disgusting.
Oh, wow.
That's a whole podcast where my friend makes me homemade pasta dishes trying to get me to like it. And I'm like, no, it's gross.
Yikes.
Because pasta's disgusting.
No, I mean, on one level it is, but on another level, it's just so comforting.
No, it's just bad. It's
Kelsey,
actively
no.
unenjoyable in my mouth.
No. Oh my God. Well, go listen to that, and if you have trouble with opinions after this, go listen to.
Yeah, I just want to
Pasta
become the most
Talkin'.
hated person on the internet.
I mean,
Apparently.
you can make it happen.
Yeah.
I think you got it. It's a good brand.
Thanks. Thanks.
You can find me at Diet J on Twitter and Instagram, jlightcomedy.com for show dates. I'm going to be in Edinburgh for the entire Fringe Festival in Scotland from August 1st through August 25th. Come check it out. Details are on my website. And if you like the podcast, leave a rating, tell a friend, and join the Facebook group where we get into more discussions and talk about other fun things. Kelsey, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a delight.
Yay, you're a delight.
You know what? I have a shirt that says that.
You should wear it all the time.
I should.
Because
It's
it's
dirty.
you. This has been Blockbusting. Go see something good for a change.